Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest online event here at the University of California, Merced. My name is Ricky Hill, and I am the e-recruiter here at UC Merced. A very big welcome to you tonight. We are thrilled that you are taking some time out of your evening to join us while we talk about our housing program here, specifically signing your housing contract here at UC Merced within our housing services. Before we get started, let me give you a couple of quick reminders for Zoom. If you need to adjust your audio settings, you can do that in the lower left corner of your screen. If you'd like to adjust the size of your window and screen, go ahead and click on View Options in the upper portion of your window. So for example, when we're showing you some screenshots in just a little bit in the middle of our presentation, go ahead and click on View Options if you would like to adjust that, and you can zoom in just a little bit to see a bit more. Lastly, and of course, most importantly, we are here and fully staffed with our content experts behind the scenes, and we plan to do a live question and answer session at the end of our presentation. Feel free to click on the Q&A button at any time, send in those questions, and we will get to those throughout the presentation as well as at the end in the live Q&A portion of tonight's event. All right, so before we get started, let me go ahead and we will move on to the agenda. We just have a few things that we would like to share with you tonight. So the first thing we will be going over is the timeline. So we want to make sure that you know all the important dates and deadlines, and basically just the process of getting signed up for your housing and getting your contract signed and everything by those due dates. We will also talk about the next steps in the process. Of course, we also have very important updates to share with you tonight. And then, as I mentioned, that live Q&A portion towards the end of our program. So make sure that you take full advantage of that. Use the Q&A button, click on that, send in those questions, and we will get to those throughout as well as at the end. Once again, my name is Ricky Hill, and I am your e-recruiter here at UC Merced. A great honor to be with you tonight. At this time, I'd like to hand things over to my friend and colleague, Lisa Perry.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Lisa Perry. I'm the director of the Students First Center. And real quick, before I kick it off and we dive into housing, I wanted to make sure you all know what the Students First Center is and how we can help you. So we are your campus one-stop. Our staff are cross-trained in admissions, financial aid, registration, and billing, and we make it a point to know a little bit more about the rest of everything else on campus so that we can get you to the right resource if we can't answer your question. If you have questions that aren't answered tonight, we are a great resource for you, and I'll drop our contact information in chat in just a little bit. And then I will be on at the end of the presentation to help answer questions and provide you with some next steps related to all the things that we need you to do for your onboarding at UC Merced. And now I'm going to turn it over to my friend Scott, and he is going to tell you all the things about housing.
Thanks, Lisa. My name is Scott Lepla. I'm the Director of Housing Services, and I'm going to be talking to you tonight particularly about the act of completing signing application. So depending on where folks are at in the process, you may have already completed some of these steps, but there are at least 400 of you or so that still need to sign the contract. So hopefully you're watching this today. Overall, housing is a two-step process at UC Merced. We don't require students to have housing. First-year students are prioritized for housing, but you have to tell us you need housing, and you do that through the application. So the first step is to submit a housing application, and to maintain that priority for campus housing. We've already had one kind of window pass. And so for that, the next checkpoint is you need to complete the submitting of the application by 4 p.m. June 6th. This is where you go to the housing portal and request housing from us. It's pretty simple. The first part is pretty simple. You have to fill out some information about you and submit that. Then the next part is signing it. And so as long as you have submitted your application by 4 p.m. on June 6th, and then we're going to turn around and make an offer to you. So you'll get an email, or you can just go back and visit the portal on June 6th, and you should see you'll see an offer of housing, and you will then be able to sign that contract. As long as you've done that by June 7th, we'll be able to house you on campus for your first year. So transfer students, you have the same timeline. So I would point out that if you're watching this and you haven't actually SIR'd, you want to make sure you take that step first. It does take a couple of days, usually about 48 hours, to get your information from the student information system after you SIR to the housing database. Often it's less, but it sometimes takes more. Well, it takes 48 hours, but oftentimes less. So just make sure you take care of that first, because the steps we're going to take tonight, access to the portal, can't happen until you do that and we get the data over from admissions. So you'll submit that application on the portal. You'll sign by the priority date. Once you sign, there are a couple things. So we're going to continue to take LLCs. You're going to see us talk about living and learning communities. We had a first checkpoint for living learning communities where we've offered some spots. Some communities still have spaces in them though, and we'll continue to offer those as spaces are available. So when we talk about LLCs, even though you'll see things talk about priority decisions in early May, you can still just say what you're interested in the application. And if there's opportunities for those, then the LLC program coordinators will offer them. Once you once you sign the housing contract, you can immediately jump into the roommate selection area. There's an option to form a roommate group where if you know people you want to room with, as long as they have also signed the housing contract, you can search for them by name and form a roommate group. And then when you either are assigned housing or you select housing, depending on availability, you'll be placed with those. You'll be either selecting for your group or being placed with your group. But earlier is better. We both assign and offer placement by priority, by date of submitting and by contract sign. So the earlier you take these steps, the better the likelihood of finding a room for your roommate group. And then move in takes place the weekend of August 17th. So it starts on Thursday, August 17th and runs through Sunday, August 20th. If there are some groups, some LLCs will come early. There are some other programs or groups that do arrive early. And so if you're with one of those groups, you'll get more information about arriving before August 17th. Generally speaking, we don't take arrivals before August 5th, though, so it'll be somewhere in that time frame. Next slide, please. Okay, so you're going to get this. What you're looking at here is the application status page for the academic year. There are a couple things about this process. I'm going to pause and just back up for a second. When you go to sign, when you access the housing portal, sometimes you may get errors depending, because sometimes if you've logged into UC Merced on the same browser, but those credentials have expired, sometimes you might get errors. If you're finding you're having trouble getting logged in, or you're getting access issues or stale web requests, just close the browser entirely and reopen it, and that generally will reset your the cookies and other security settings, and it will refresh those. It'll prompt you to log back in, and so you can access the page. Most technical issues we find able to resolve using that step, or if you're having trouble using a link to get to the correct page in an email, you can always visit the housing website, housing.ucmerced.edu. There's a link to the portal directly on our top menu from there, and you can click on that, and it'll sign in directly from there. So that solves almost all the access issues that are reported to us. One of those two steps. Once you'll get an email that says you've been offered housing, and that's when you'll revisit the site. You'll sign in. You'll follow the same steps you did to submit the application. And when you get to the term page here, you'll see a big, it's in a red box, and there's a big link that says sign the housing contract here, right? So you'll click on that. And it'll take you to the next page. So click next slide, please. And then you're going to start getting a bunch of notices. So we're in the state of California, and we like to be transparent about a lot of things. So there's lots of stuff we're required to tell you. You can read through these things. I mean, it just says like, this is a notice that we do use pesticides in the areas. So next, you'll sign there. And these, you basically have to either check a box or sign. So here we talk about how to submit a room report, how to report the condition of your room. And so you'll read through that, and then you will check that you understand, and then you'll advance. Next slide, please. Now, here's where the process begins to split. If on the day that you log in to sign, if you are age 18 and over, you'll be taken to the page to sign the academic year contract. So you can scroll through the contract. We'll display it here in the browser. You can scroll through it, and then you need to check the box and type your name in the signature box. When that's done and you click save and continue, it will save that you have signed your housing contract. So that's like the first and necessary part of this process. And if you go ahead and let's go to the next slide. If you're under 18, it'll take you to a spot where you need to designate someone who has legal authority to sign for you. This can be typically a parent or guardian. And so here, what you'll enter, you'll see you'll be delivered here, and you can see that my sample student here has already created one. But you'll click on that box that says Add Parent or Guardian Signer. Clicking on that button will take you to another page where you can input information about the person you want to sign the housing contract. So let's go to the next slide. When you click on that button, it'll deliver you to what's called the proxy form. So that's the kind of technical name. Someone's being a proxy and signing for you. And so you'll put in their first name, their last name, their email address, a relationship, and then the PIN. Now, for these values, first name, last name, email address, it's very important that you get these correct. And I only say that because sometimes students are typing in a hurry and you maybe add an extra T or something to the name, right? Which isn't, if there's a misspelling there, it's not a big deal, but it can cause problems when your parent or guardian is trying to enter their name, first name, last name, and they're typing it the way they know it should be spelled. But the system doesn't know that. It just knows what you put in this form. So if there are any misspellings or anything on here, then it will pass that over, and it will require that your parent or guardian also actually either misspell their name, or you can delete it and resubmit, which is an option as well. The PIN number is just something for you to create. It'll get sent to the person that receives it, but it's just an extra little bit of security about who should what they need to put in that form to actually advance the signing. You just make it up. It's your own, whatever you want to put in there. But your proxy will get notified of it. So go ahead and we're going to, when this is all filled out, you'll go onto you'll hit save and continue, and then you'll get whoever you name will get an email that says that has this information. It will say that it will disclose to them that you've applied for housing at UC Merced. So that's important to know, and that they need to log in and sign. And you can see here that I actually mail merge in all the information here. So everything is merged in exactly as it is there, which is important because your proxy will have to enter this information in exactly when they click on that link. They don't have to have an account. They don't have to have done anything with UC Merced. When they click on that link, it will take them to a page where they'll enter the same information. So they'll click on that link and that'll take us to the next slide. Then they will enter it in exactly as it was received. Right? So they'll plug in all this information just like you did. Next. And then they will be presented with the option to review the contract and then type in their name. And when they hit save and continue, then the contract will be signed. And at this point, then the two paths that diverged at 18 and over and 18 and under will then come back together, and the rest of the steps will be the same for everyone. So you'll see that you'll get that display. It'll say it's been successfully signed, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now, if you're under 18, you actually, once you complete the proxy, you can continue with the rest of the steps, but your contract will remain in offered status until your proxy completes the signing process. And you may need to go back in and review the proxy and then update. You may need to delete or reform it. If you're running into problems, sometimes with your proxy not being able to sign, sometimes going back, you can go back and repeat this process. Everything we had, you can go back and we just demonstrated, you can repeat, and you can actually edit and update your proxy and remove them and add them again. And oftentimes that will resolve the issue. So let's go on to the next page. This is what, so after you go through the signing process, either naming a proxy or signing the contract, you'll be asked if you have interest in a living and learning community. And here, the first question is, are you interested in any of these, right? Some students aren't, and so they don't need to check that. But if you're interested in any of these LLCs, you'll want to check that box, and then it will take you to the next page. If you check it, it will take you to the next page where you can actually prioritize up to 2. So you'll be asked to enter, you'll click on the add button, and you can then, it'll bring up LLC, your first preference, and you'll be able to name the first preference. If you're a new transfer, you'll see different options than if you're a first-year student. So if you're doing this with someone who's a different year classification, you'll see different options because different LLCs are open to different classifications of students, first year, new transfer, or continuing students. And it'll tell you can add one more. You don't have to add two, but you're willing to add at least one. When you've added the preferences and LLC and have them in the correct order, you'll then hit save and continue. And then we'll go to the next slide. Here, you're going to go back to, again, acknowledging more handbooks and policies. So we do provide a link to our housing handbook. The housing handbook is the guideline for rules. And there's a lot of information in there about things you can bring, what are the guidelines for community on campus. And it's good reading to go through, but we give you a link to it. You can always click on that link. It'll open up in a new window and you can save that for reading later. Or you can go through and review it and then come back and check the handbook agreement, because it is required, for everyone living on campus to acknowledge and agree that they'll live by the housing handbook. Then we also provide information about our alcohol and drug policies, particularly that even though marijuana is legal for those over the age of 21, it still remains illegal in any form, regardless of medicinal status or anything on campus at the university. It remains prohibited, not really illegal, but prohibited. Because we're a drug-free campus. And so we want to make sure that that's documented here, that you understand that, and you'll be asked to check a box acknowledging that as well. Then we'll go on to the next step. Here we talk about lockouts. Again, it's just more information about kind of key elements, no pun intended here, because we spend time here talking about keys. But you are going to get a set of keys to a room, and you're going to have your student ID card that you're going to get at orientation will be enabled with building access. And as part of that community, there's a requirement to use those things responsibly, including if they're lost or stolen, reporting them so they can be replaced. And this outlines what those guidelines are, what some of the main responsibilities you have as someone who's issued access to a UC Merced residential building, what your requirements are. You'll type your name in to sign agree to this, and then we'll go on to the next page. So as you can see, there's just a lot of agreeing to stuff. Now, the next step is about renter's insurance. We partnered with GradGuard. They do quite a bit of college student and dormitory focused renter's insurance policies. And so we don't require it, but we do present it to you because we do think that renter's insurance is important. It's also quite affordable. So it covers you if your possessions are damaged, through things that maybe aren't your fault, or if there's different, I can think of a couple good examples. I mean, I've been in student housing for almost 20 years. So somebody throws a Frisbee down the hallway, that Frisbee hits a fire extinguisher, a sprinkler head, and now it starts spraying water. And if you've ever seen a fire sprinkler go off, they are pretty epic. They can dump quite a bit of water because that's their function, right? And so now that water, if that takes place on the 5th floor, is now going to run down to all the rooms on floors 4, 3, 2, and 1. And so renter's insurance can cover you in those cases. It can cover you in some of the things that are outlined here. And so that will help give you some coverage, and it's generally pretty affordable. So then you'll go on, when you continue to the next step, we'll go to the next slide. It'll give you, we pass some information about you to this system if you want to continue, usually just a name or some other information, but you don't have to continue. It'll give you some options. So you can decline all coverage. You can ask to be reminded later if you don't want to make the decision then, but you want to talk it over with parents or guardians. Sometimes there's questions about like, will my homeowner's policy cover me? Generally speaking, if there are parents on the call, I generally recommend considering renter's insurance anyway, because it's usually pretty cheap, and then it can protect you from some homeowners claims, which can have downstream effects. But either way, you're going to have some options to respond here. And if you want to pursue that, it'll take you to the GradGuard site where they'll give you a quote for coverage for the year, and you can choose to either decline that or be reminded about it later or accept it. And then you'll go to the GradGuard system and continue that process. So for the purposes of this example, we're going to decline all coverage and go on to the next slide. And so it'll tell you what status you've picked. If you've declined, if you've asked to be reminded later, but you'll have the option of changing this later. At this point, you're just confirming what your decision is. You'll hit save and continue. We'll go to the next slide. And here's where you choose your meal plan. So you're just going to choose your meal plan. I provide some information to explain what CAT dollars. All the meal plans work the same. They all provide unlimited access to the dining halls while they're open. And what that means is from the start of your housing contract, or really the start of your housing, through the covered periods of the meal plan, which are outlined in the housing agreement. So you have a meal plan during, there are portions where we don't offer meal service during the Thanksgiving holiday. We don't offer meal service when you're under contract during winter break. We do offer meal service during spring break, but the times when meal service is not offered is indicated in the housing agreement. But for the rest of the time, which is really most of the time you're in class, you'll be able to go in the morning, swipe, and every hour you can go in and eat as much as you would like or as little as you would like. And every meal plan allows that. For every hour the dining hall's open, you can swipe in and get something to eat. So there's really no reason to go hungry under the basic part of the unlimited part of the meal plan. The part that you're choosing is how many cat dollars you would like. Cat dollars are a campus currency that you can use at our local stores like the Snack Shack or at the food trucks. You can also use them at the Lantern. There are different places where you can submit or use those cat dollars, but you don't have to buy them. So you don't, and also I need to update this slide. You don't need them to do laundry. So we got rid of the laundry is all inclusive now, but you do need your student ID card to use it. So don't feel like you need to buy a bunch of cat dollars up front. If you're not sure, just choose the U85, but you do need to choose a meal plan. If for some reason you don't choose a meal plan, we'll assign you the U85 by default. Next slide, please. All right. Okay, well, that's grad guard again, so we're going to continue. All right, the last thing after you choose your meal plan is you're going to get asked about, do you want to participate in gender inclusive housing? And gender inclusive housing is designed principally to work with, to provide housing options for students that are not on the gender binary. Most of our housing is gendered housing, so male identified, female identified housing, and we take that information from the student information system. So when you submitted your application to UC Merced, you provided that information. Now, if you specified male or female there, it will be indicated, or if you specified if non-binary or unspecified, it'll be listed there too. Also, if you left the question blank, if you didn't respond during your application, it will pass your data over as unspecified for gender, which is fine. But gender inclusive housing, that's one of the first things that we want you to check. So you're going to see that we display your current UC Merced gender identity marker as what it is in the system, because sometimes students don't understand. They're like, why am I, U gender or unspecified gender? Well, maybe because you didn't fill that field out when you were submitting your application. So we asked you to confirm that first, because it does have a lot of downstream consequences when you're choosing housing. So gender inclusive housing is a program that we offer where we hold certain spaces available for students to live with anybody of any gender identity. But we do prioritize it for students with non-binary or unspecified gender identities, because they can't be served by the rest of the gendered housing at UC Merced. So for most students, you will leave this blank. You won't need this. But if you read through this and this does apply to you, or your gender identity marker is unspecified, I would recommend that you choose the room profile mandatory of gender inclusive housing. That's the only option you'll have here. It'll say, like, do you want to add this? And when you add that, then you'll be able to, when you do room selection or when you do placement, you'll be prioritized for placement in rooms that do not check on gender. And it will also present you, if you do roommate matching, with other roommates that have that same gender identity marker. So, sorry, that same mandatory profile of gender inclusive housing. And it will actually require that everybody in your group have the same, have the same gender inclusive housing marker. For most students, this isn't something you're going to want. And so if you choose to participate in gender inclusive housing, what you're saying to the university is that you're okay with being assigned anyone of any gender identity. I just say this because every year we have students that choose it and they think they're going to live with somebody that maybe is, if they identify as male, they want to live with a female identified roommate or roommates. But it's not co-ed housing. You're just saying that you are okay of anybody of any gender identity being placed in your room with you. And so in a room assignment with you. So again, for most students, it's not something that you would choose, but it's there and it's explained. And if you choose it, then it'll be, this is where you'll make that choice, but you can update it again later, which we'll talk about here in a second. So this is the last step. You'll hit save and continue. And then once you're done, if you are over 18 and you've gone through this process, it will mark you as contract signed. And it will not assign you a room selection time. That comes later, but it is displayed here. If you when it's assigned, you'll come back to the status page to update that. So it'll be blank for most of you once you sign. And then if you are under 18 and your parent or guardian hasn't signed it yet, it will still show as offered housing. And it'll show, so you'll know whether they've signed it or not. Once your parent or guardian completes that, this page will display as contract signed. On this same page, which is the page where we started the process, there's a couple options. You can update your LLC interest. If you click on that link, it'll take you back. So if you decide you don't want to be in LLCs anymore, you can go and deselect that option. Also down in the roommates below this, it'll show who your roommates are when your room is assigned. It'll show room assignment, and it'll also show you where you can update your roommate groups, and that's where you'd also change your gender inclusive housing marker. And all of it's on this page. So let's go to the next page. Yes, this is where you can form roommate groups. If you click on the roommates group tool, once you sign your contract, it'll be available, and you can click on that, and then you can browse through other students and look for other groups. And you can, if you know who you want to live with, you can search for them by email. You can search by UC Merced email, by student ID number. You can search for them by name. If they've already formed a roommate group and they want to add them, you can search by the roommate group. Using this tool, but this area is also where you can change your gender inclusive housing profile. So let's go to the next page. All right, so then this is when all these boxes are green, you're all done. So you'll see step 1, which is submitting application, is done, and step 2, which is where this is done. I will point out here that if you did have any issues choosing a meal plan and it's not letting you either change a meal plan or you don't have a meal plan selected, you can go back, particularly if you're under 18, and repeat the contract signing, and it'll just take you back through the process. And that's one of the best ways to kind of fix some of those issues. Just repeat the signing process, and then it'll take you back to the meal plan choice. All right, next page. All right, now I'm going to pass it back to Lisa from Students First to talk through your next steps.
Hi, everybody. I know that was a lot of information, and I'm going to give you more information right now, but don't worry, because we recorded this and we will be sending it out to you and posting it online. And all of the information I'm going to go over right now is actually in a handy dandy 2-sided handout that we have for you. And when we email you out the copy of this video, we will attach this handout so that you have easy access. Over the summer, there's a handful of items you have to do if you're going to be attending UC Merced this fall. And this handout kind of outlines those in a easy to read way. And what I recommend doing is, glancing over the whole thing and then, focusing on 1 month at a time. You also all have a personalized checklist in your Connect account. Your Connect account is our student portal. Once you log in, if you go to the My Merced area and then click on My Checklist, many of the items that you're going to see on this handout are going to be on your checklist. Pro tip, there are 2 items that won't show up on your personalized checklist, but you will find in this handout. Those 2 items are: 1, applying for housing, because it is not mandatory to apply for housing. So therefore, we didn't put it on your checklist in your Connect account telling you have to do it. The items on your Connect checklist are required. You cannot skip any of them. They all need to be done. The other item that won't show up on your Connect checklist is your placement exams. And I'm not going to lie, that's just a current system limitation we have right now. So to be honest, that's why it's not on there. We're working on it. But again, that's why we do things like this. We have your webinar, we send you helpful email reminders, and then we make these cool handouts to help you remember the other items you need to do. So as we move into June, if you're applying for financial aid tends to be a big document deadline on June 1st. Your checklist will display your personalized dates and deadlines. So make sure that you're watching those and not missing them. If you miss a date or deadline, it can have adverse consequences. So if you're getting to a point where you think you're struggling with something we're asking for, or you're concerned because the deadline is coming up, please contact us sooner rather than later. We are here to help you and we want you to be successful. So please reach out to us. I did drop the Students First Center contact information in chat. And so I hope that helps you. The other kind of caveat that I would give about this handout is on 6.5, it says SLR deadline. If you go over to our key on the left-hand side, it says SLR only required if listed in your checklist and Connect. So some of you may have an SLR requirement and some of you may not. So if you don't see that on your personalized checklist, that's okay. That's because it's not required. But again, if you want help navigating your checklist or have questions, we're here for you. So this is May and June, and then let's go to July and August real quick. So you'll notice that the things that you have to do get a little bit smaller in July and August, but July is when you're going to come to campus for new student orientation. And new student orientation registration is listed in your checklist. If you haven't signed up for it yet, you might want to go in and start looking at the dates available. And then we've got some other helpful webinars that are going on this summer to kind of guide you through this. And we've done the webinars, as we're calling them, just-in-time support. So you'll notice in July, on July 25th, let's see, hold on really quick. We're doing a student employment and career services webinar because it's in late June when you start getting access to actually applying for jobs on campus. So we're going to follow up with you in late July to make sure that you've got the help you need and that you, get your questions answered. The other really important thing that is on here is see the red box around your email. Make sure you know how to get to your UC Merced email and that you're checking it. It's very important. We're going to communicate with you there, especially when you get here and you need to start communicating with faculty members. That's the tool that you're going to use. So make sure that you're checking it. And then the other item that I want to point out is we do send monthly electronic newsletters. So you'll see on July 10th, it says, read your newsletter. These newsletters will remind you of all these things, plus include additional fun items in case you have questions about student clubs and orgs. What's welcome week going to be like? What do I need to pack when I'm moving in? There'll be fun things in there that'll kind of help get you a little more excited and get you connected with our campus. I think I am not going to talk at you anymore, and I'm going to let you all ask us questions now. So Ricky, do we have any questions that haven't been answered yet?
Let's take a look. I know we have been getting to those through that Q&A option. Let me go ahead and drag this back over to my screen here. So I know it is a good idea, though, since we did have those dates and deadlines posted. So one that we definitely want to make sure people know about, and you mentioned it as well, is June 1st. So the SIR deadline, statement of intent to register. Super important day for everyone. If you want to become a Bobcat and join us in person here and become a part of our Bobcat family, make sure that you meet that deadline, June 1st. So put that in your phone, in your email, post-it notes on your screen. That's how I remember things. Make sure that you don't miss that deadline. Okay, so just wanted to plug that really quickly here. Let's take a look at our questions now. And if you haven't yet sent in your question, you still have time. Go ahead and click on that Q&A button and get that sent over, and we will get to those in just a moment. So do we have to pay renter's insurance every year?
No, when you sign up for Grad Guard renters insurance, you do it for the term of the housing contract. And then you can also cancel or update it later directly with GradGuard. We just provide that as a kind of starting point to help ease students into considering renter's insurance, because it is, I mean, in our experience, we found it to be very helpful for students in the cases where there's unforeseen damages or things that happen out of their control. But no, you only buy it for the term of your housing contract.
Very good. And then are students able to use their own funds instead of CAT dollars?
Yes, you can use any credit or debit card at these same locations in lieu of CAT dollars.
Very good. And then the follow-up to that is there anything that requires CAT dollars instead of personal funds? Is there anything that's just exclusive CAT dollars?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Very good. Can we talk a little bit about the meal plans? What options do we have for that?
Yeah, so there are, I believe, 6 options. There's a U, so they're numbered. Sorry, they're titled by how many CAT dollars they come with. So 85, 250, 400, 500, and 600. So there, I think, is that 5 meal plans? So there are 5 meal plans, and so they all work. They are all what we call unlimited. So you'll see U or unlimited or U85, U250. And the way that works is that any meal plan, you wake up in the morning at 7 a.m., go to get breakfast, you can swipe in, eat a bowl of oatmeal, then you can leave, go to class, come back at 8:30, swipe in again. As long every hour the dining hall is open, you can swipe in. Now the dining hall serves different things at different times. So if you literally go in every hour, you may not find the same food or may not find all the options, but you can go in and eat whenever you want, and you can, it's all you care to eat every time you go in. So we recognize that students need that flexibility, and that's why we offer that plan, which is probably one of the best in the UC system. But it also kind of takes the sting out of needing to buy these extra campus CAT dollars, which we do offer them, and they are quite helpful, particularly if you're someone who gets bored with the same food regularly. And the dining hall offers a wide variety of foods, but if you're not an adventurous eater, even the most adventurous eater can start to feel like, I ate on campus for like 17 years, like between living there and working there professionally. So it definitely can start to feel a little routine over times. But you can use those CAT dollars then to go break that routine and go get things like food truck. They'll have like different food trucks. The Philly cheesesteak food truck. There's like Chinese cuisine food truck. There's I know they have Vietnamese coffee sometimes, a food truck there that focuses and offers that. So there's different options that are available in that with CAT dollars that you could use. And depending on, like, some students have a lot of financial aid or have different aid, they may want to max that out, and that will pay for a meal plan, but it may not pay for other things. And so we offer those at different ranges to help meet students with where they're at and with their own personal needs. But in essence, they all work very similarly. It's just how much kind of flexible spending do you want at these other locations.
Very good. Thanks, Scott.
Mhm.
The next question, can we sign up for housing using other services like roomies or apartment.com? Will there be a
No,
penalty?
no, and in fact, I would say if you want to look for off-campus housing, university maintains a partnership with apartments.com and if you look at the housing website, housing.ucmerced.edu, there's actually a tab section for off-campus housing, and you can use that to browse and look for listings that are focused on the university community. Those are from landlords, either larger organizations, that maintain lots of rental units, or individual landowner or like landlords can post units for rent on there as well. And that also offers a section to find roommates. That is, and everybody using that section has all gone through UC Merced single sign-on. So they're all that group is limited to faculty, staff, and students at UC Merced. So if you're looking for a way to have an apartments.com style experience and look for off-campus housing, you can use, the website is och.ucmerced.edu. O as in Oscar, C as in Charlie, H as in hotel, och.ucmerced.edu. And again, you can find it at the housing website as to link to that.
Very good. And then how do we find a roommate for the same LLC that we're interested in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you go into the roommate groupings tool, you'll be able to search for roommates that have the same. You can search for program profiles, and you can search for the ones that have the same profile that you do. There's actually a filter in the roommate group section that allows you to do that. It will also, when you get assigned, if you get assigned an LLC, there's logic in the list that should be reducing it down to only those folks that also have the same LLC to choose from. So it's important that if you decide that you're like, I don't need this LLC anymore, you're going to need to reach back out to the group that put you in the LLC and let them know you don't want to participate anymore, and then we can remove that profile.
Very good. And then are students required to apply and sign a new contract every year?
Yes, you'll apply each year. In the fall, you apply for academic year housing. As long as you apply by the posted dates, you're guaranteed housing your first year and your second year. So in February of 2024, we're going to open the housing process for continuing students like we did this year. As long as you apply by the deadlines and by the priority deadline as a second year student, you'll be guaranteed housing for fall 2024. The first 2 years we guarantee as long as you work through the priority dates. And after that, we don't guarantee housing anymore, but you do need to reapply every year. But your application is good for the academic year, fall and spring. If you need housing during the winter break or during the summer, you apply and pay for that separately.
Great. And then they did also have a follow-up, which you may have just answered, but just to clarify, does meeting this year's deadline automatically guarantee them housing for the 2-year time span, or do they need to meet a deadline?
No, it just guarantees you for the first year. You have to, again, because we don't require housing. So you have to tell us you want housing. And so if you're a second year student next you'll be a first year student next year on campus. Let's say you applied for housing and got in it this year. Then next February, when you're applying for housing, you'll be applying as a second year student. But as long as you apply and sign your contract by the priority dates, you will be guaranteed housing for your second year. And so that, as long as, but you have to tell us again, because we don't make you get housing, and not every student wants to live on campus a second year. So and the only way we know that is if you tell us. So we have to set a timeline by which you have to tell us. That's called the priority date. So you have to apply and sign by the priority dates for your second year.
Great. And what does the AY housing status mean?
That's academic year housing status.
Very good.
So that's 2023, 2024.
Great. We had that one come in a couple times here. All right. What is the most commonly used meal plan for on-campus students?
Yeah, 60% of students have the U85, and then about another 30% have the U250.
Great.
So
and
most commonly it's U85.
Okay, perfect. If you, let's see, if you have AY housing status and it's showing as yellow instead of green, even with everything that needs to be signed, is that just due to something in the system, or should that trigger them to check in?
No, as long as your housing application status, it should say contract signed. As long as it says contract signed, you're good.
And how do students go about getting a parking permit if they're eligible?
You can, I may actually, you would request it. So I did reply to this in one of the questions. You can request overnight parking through TAPS, Traffic and Parking Services, TAPS, .ucmerced.edu. And there you'll see a section about requesting parking for campus overnight parking. And generally speaking, you'll apply, and there's a couple criteria there where it says we look for folks because I was in the reserves when I was an undergraduate, so I had to regularly go to different places for training. And so if that applies to you or will apply to you, you can apply for that. And there's also different, if you're a caregiver or other things, there's lots of reasons why you might need a car. I would say if you're interested in that, go ahead and apply regardless if you think you have that, particularly if you live more than 100 miles from campus. I think we're taking a look at that. And I would just say, if you think you need parking, or if it's a consideration for you and coming to UC Merced, just go ahead and request it. and we'll see how we can manage that. I can't speak for TAPS necessarily, that they're a different unit, but I would say, like, usually what I find at the university is if you think you need something and you're not sure you can get it, you should just ask for it anyway and see if you can, and see if there's an option, because you may not know everything. And that's where Lisa's team at the Students First Center can be very helpful in helping you see what options are available. So
Yeah.
ask your questions.
Great advice, Scott. Always ask. I mean, that's a good tip for life. The worst that somebody is going to say is no, like, and that doesn't hurt you. But back to parking. Many of you may have also received an email about the Golden Bobcat experience, and you should definitely read that email as well. There's some exciting information in there. And so if you have that email and have questions about it, please contact the Students First Center tomorrow. And then I'm going to jump in real quick where I'm going to switch topics only because I clicked answer live and I didn't mean to, for one, which was, could you link the health insurance waiver for UC Merced? I put that in the webinar chat, and it's also found in your My Checklist in your Connect account.
Very good. All right, so on to our next question. Should I accept my housing offer if I didn't submit my housing accommodation yet?
Yes, you should, particularly if you think you're coming. So I would say, like, if you're going to come, because you still have the priority date for accommodation requests is June 1. So, but if you've got housing, just go ahead and get that signed. You can still cancel until June 1 with no penalty. But I would recommend, I always recommend, signing it, because it's the only way to know you're going to have a guaranteed housing is to sign that housing contract and get it done. The worst case scenario with housing here is that if you're not able to get the accommodation you want, or for that, then you could cancel housing. If it means you're not going to live on campus, then it's $300, which in the scheme of housing, I mean, at $300 is a lot of money still, even for me, but it's not in the scheme of housing. Trying to find housing, it's not a tremendous amount to make sure that you have a guaranteed housing space for fall. With regard to accommodations, there's a couple questions in there. So we do have single rooms. We do have single rooms in Half Dome, but single rooms are only available to students that have documented accommodation because of the limited number of these rooms. And over the years, we found that we just needed more. And so you can't get an elective single, but there are, if you do have documented needs, that's the only way really to get a single room on campus, particularly as a first year. As a single room as a first year isn't really recommended anyway. There's a lot of reasons for that. And studies have shown that they do much better if you have roommates, and it helps with the transition to the community. There's a lot of things that you don't necessarily know to ask, but having a roommate can help you, particularly a roommate that might be in a similar classes, like in a living learning community. But I would say for anybody that's listening that's wondering, you don't have to even started your housing application to submit an accommodation request for housing. The processes are totally independent, but no matter what accommodation you get, you still have to have signed and followed the housing contract processes to get housing for the next year. So I always recommend, no matter what, follow the timeline for housing, retain your priority, solve your accommodation as you're able to.
Fantastic. And now a question coming in from someone who is wondering what the chances are of them getting on-campus housing in their third year.
Pretty good. I mean, it depends year on year, right? I mean, the biggest variable in that is everybody on this, most people, I wouldn't say not everybody, but most people on this call now, which are first year students. First years and new transfers have the guaranteed housing. And so we have to reserve beds for them. And every year that means we generally limit our continuing or first and our continuing students, which are juniors and seniors, to, like, we restrict those applications and contracts early in the year. So right now there are about 600 students that are waiting for an offer, but there are still another 800 that have already received housing for the next year. So it's a pretty good group, pretty good sized group. But it's just not guaranteed. And we do our best to try to offer campus housing to anybody that wants it. And so, and in last year, we were able to make an offer to everybody, whether they wanted to take it or not. We were able to offer, whether they ultimately took it or not. And each year, that's our goal. It just depends on the amount of space. So I would say, it's hard for me to put a number to those chances, which is, it just, the best thing you can do for yourself is pay close attention to your email, apply early, sign early, because that's how priority is given out, is by interest, and to pay attention to the processes as they're described.
And what would happen if someone cancels their housing contract after the June 1st deadline? Do they have a penalty?
There is a $300 penalty if you cancel after June 1st. So June 2nd on, if your cancellation date is June 2nd or later, you incur that penalty date, or that penalty fee of $300.
And when will students start finding out about their dorm room information?
Yeah, so that's if you sign before June 7th, we are actually, so we're doing, for the students that signed by the initial priority date, which was May 5th. That was almost like a whole month ago. But May 5th, they're actually getting ready. They're ramping up for online room selection, which is going to start on Tuesday, May 30th. So we're about a week out from that. They'll get to pick their room online, 4 groups, and pick their room online. And with this next group, we're going to open up that process again. I want to say it's June 12th. Lisa, I talk about the date, but I think it's that like 2 Tuesdays after that. Is the second Tuesday in June. I believe we're going to open that up again for folks in this group, and you'll have some time to go in and select rooms. That's totally optional process. If you want to go in and look and pick a room and form a roommate group and try to pick a room together, and we give that option, you can choose from the available spaces. No matter what, you're going to have as long as you've signed by the priority date, you're going to have a room assigned to you by the third week in July, by that Saturday.
Okay, perfect. And there's a question again about the single rooms. So this one, they're actually asking specifically about Half Dome, if there are any single rooms available in that residence hall.
There are single rooms available in that, but again, they're only for students with accommodations.
Okay, and then follow-up question as well, and this might be a good question to address for all of our residence halls. Are the floors and bathrooms in that building, so specific to Half Dome, but again, to any of our buildings, are they gender-specific floors and bathrooms, or is every floor potentially male, female, co-ed?
Yeah, every floor is co-ed. In Half Dome, Sentinel Rock, El Portal, Glacier Point, Granite Pass. So most of our buildings, the floors are co-ed and the bathrooms are gendered, although there are some gender, like in the El Portal, Sentinel Rock, Glacier Point, and Granite Pass, which is where most first years end up assigned or placed. That's where all the LLCs are. So it just tend to be where most first years are. There are gender neutral bathrooms, 2 gender neutral baths and showers on each floor of those communities. In Half Dome, the bathrooms are gendered by different genders, but they're all in the same, like the floors are co-ed, but there are different bathrooms on each floor, and the bathrooms are gendered. In Mariposa, Tuolumne, and Valley Terraces, this would be more important for new transfer students that are looking. Those suites are gendered suites. So you live in a room in a group of rooms that share like a semi-private bathroom. So it's like 3 bedrooms, like a living room and a bathroom and bath and shower. And so that's restricted to those folks that are in that suite. And so those are the suite bathrooms are really just they're kind of semi-private and for whomever is in the suite. So if it's a co-ed or gender inclusive suite, then it could be anybody that's assigned there using those bathrooms in those suites.
Okay, great. And we have a few more minutes of our event tonight, so let's see what else we can get answered. So what happens if we don't choose roommates or select a room?
Yeah, great question. You are placed. We will run through and we'll do like a sweep, and usually in early July, we'll start looking for folks that don't choose, and we'll place you. First, we'll look to place you into a location, and then we'll look for a roommate that also hasn't been placed. And we use the roommate matching profiles that you complete in your housing application to try to find a good fit. So I recommend that you complete that, to the best of how you think you respond now. Don't complete that aspirationally. And by that, I mean, if you aspire to be someone who wakes up every morning at 5 a.m. to go to the gym, but you don't actually wake up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym, don't say that in your preference, because you're going to get matched with somebody that wakes up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym. And that can turn into a long year. If that's, if you don't happen to also develop that same habit. So just answer it as you think you are right now, as best you can. And then you'll work through that. Now, when you also, so you'll get assigned a roommate based on those, and you'll get assigned a room based on the spaces available. That brings up another point too, that even if you have a roommate group, we'll try our best to fit it, but at the end of the process, there may not be, like if you have a roommate group of 3, we may not have enough empty triples to fit, or quads with 3 vacancies. So we do split the roommate groups to try to get them to fit, to try to fit them. And so we'll typically split off, like if we have a two beds in a triple, we'll take 2 of the roommates, but not the third. And we usually just base that. It's typically based on application submit dates, application sign dates.
Like a little puzzle, right? You're trying
It
to fit
is.
everyone
It's a
into the
complicated
open
puzzle.
spots. All right, everybody. Well, we are getting closer to the end here, and I don't want to run out of time. So I would like to go ahead and allow Scott and Lisa, if there's any last minute words of advice or tips and tricks, dates and deadlines, anything that you would like to leave with our audience tonight, now's your chance.
I'm going to defer to Scott since this is particularly about housing and there were lots of questions. So I give him all my time.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. What I would let folks know on the call is that if you do have housing specific questions, particularly about your application, or if you want to follow up on some of these things, you're going to want to contact housing, specifically housing@ucmerced.edu. That's one of the things, that's a great place to kind of start. And I've got a team of students that respond kind of analogous to what Students First has, but just for housing stuff. I would say if you have aid or financial aid questions, start with Student First. So sometimes we get questions about what's the cost difference to living on campus. And if you're really talking about aid, or like what do your aid packages look like, Students First is a great place to start. We're looking forward to welcoming you all to campus. And I want to try to house as many first year and new transfer students as I can get. So I'd encourage you to apply, get it signed, let us work on kind of getting you through the process. We're excited to offer, I think we might be the only UC doing first year room selection online. I'm not sure, I could be making up facts there, but to my knowledge, I think we're the only ones doing it actively right now. And so we're excited to offer that opportunity and have you be part of that first group. So get everything turned in, get everything signed, and then ask your questions as early as you can. I generally do not recommend every year at orientation, I find students that have kind of put off this or haven't made sure that they have their application signed, and then they're in the spot of not having housing. And you don't want to be that student at orientation with your parent trying to explain why you thought your housing contract was signed. So if you're not sure, just keep asking until you get confirmation if it's not obvious, right? And it should say right on your portal there, contract signed, when you view your application. So that's the stage you're trying to get to. If you get to that stage, I can house you, I'll guarantee you housing, you'll get a bed. And then from there, we can work out better or worse on the beds.
Great advice. And I went ahead and copy and pasted in a couple links from earlier, as well as a couple more for where you can find any of our upcoming webinars or live events, in-person events that we may have coming up. So go ahead and hop over to that chat box really quickly and you can start clicking on those links. There's one for housing that was mentioned. Also the Student First Center contact info, fantastic resource to keep at your fingertips to call them, Zoom them, show up in person, all of those fun ways. You can call them too, or email. They've got all the ways. And then you can also click on the next steps link. That is another important one. We did have a QR code on one of the slides for that as well. So you can go ahead and click on that. It's a pretty long website, but it does have every single step in the process. And having said all of the important steps, one of the best and the most important is the SIR, your statement of intent to register, become a Bobcat, join our Bobcat family, June 1st at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. That is the deadline. So mark your calendars, post-it notes, all the places that you look every single day, and make sure that you don't miss that important deadline for SIR, June 1st. That is the date for everybody. So if you're first year, if you're transfer, it's the same for everyone. Tonight's been so much fun as always. Thank you so much to Scott and to Lisa for your fantastic presentation. All of the fast fingers behind the scenes of all of my friends and colleagues back there as well. Once again, check out that events page, get yourself signed up for an upcoming event, and we hope to see you very soon. If not online, even better if we get to meet you in person. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.